Good morning. We looked today at verses 27 through the end of chapter 27 of the book of Acts. We've got one chapter left for the next couple of days. But it starts out, Paul is on the ship with a bunch of these other men, and they've been running ahead of a storm. A great storm on the Sea of on the Mediterranean Sea, rather. And it starts out, verse 27, when the 14th night had come, and they were drifting across the Sea of Adria. So this is evidently a section of this Mediterranean Sea that they would call that certain area. I don't know. And it says it was about midnight, and the sailors somehow thought that it seemed like they were approaching land. They were getting, more shallow water or something, and they put out sounding, for the depth sounding, the bottom sounding. You kind of wonder. I wonder, when the ship is being pushed by those waves and the storm like that. But anyway, they got a reading back of 20 fathoms. There's 6 feet in a fathom, so about 120 feet of water, that the boat was in, the ship was in. And a little later, they took another sounding, and they were down to 15 fathoms, 90 feet. So they were coming up to getting closer to some land or a shallower spot for whichever. And so they start kind of preparing, not sure where they are. It's been dark and stormy. 14 days they've been riding out this storm, and that's a long time. You'd think that, the Mediterranean Sea just doesn't seem that big to me. So the ship wasn't moving so awfully fast, even though being driven by the storm, or maybe the storm was totally against them. Some and just driving them here and there and back and forth and in circles, but 14 days they'd been adrift. And so they let down, it says, 4 anchors from the stern, from the back of the boat. They put four sea anchors out, something that kind of creates some drag. I don't know if it would get all the way to the bottom, but something that would kind of hold the boat back in the water. The water on the top is moving up and down waves and driven and everything, but, down below the water is still, it's stagnant. It's just the surface of the water that's really moving. The waves are breaking and everything that way, but, you get down below the surface of the water and, there's some breaking power, there's some holding power. So they put down the sea anchors. And then it says they started letting down the boat. They must have had a lifeboat on there because some of them were thinking they were going to get in the lifeboat and take off. Who would want to get into a little smaller boat out in the middle of a raging storm? Not me. I wouldn't want to do that in the middle of the night anyway. Who knows where you are? Nothing there. But Paul understands. He figures out what they're going to do, and he tells the soldiers, the centurion, his guard, that if the seamen escape, if they get off, there's no guarantees for anybody. So the soldiers cut the ropes that are holding this boat. So the seamen, the people that are running the boat, can't escape either. They're all captive on the same boat that way. And just shortly before daybreak, it says that Paul urges them all to eat. And he reminds them, it's been 14 days we've been battled around here with this storm. And I don't get seasick very easily, or motion sickness that way. But I think 14 days getting tossed around on a boat like that, I probably wouldn't have been able to eat and keep a whole lot down either. And even just the thought of eating, just kind of, makes your stomach kind of roll and kind of, what's going to happen. But Paul encourages them all to eat because, number one, they don't know what land they're close to. They haven't been able to do any navigation or anything. They're completely at the mercies of the elements. But Paul encourages them all to eat. And then it says, and then they throw the wheat overboard. So this was the most precious commodity. They hadn't dumped the wheat as of yet. They had tossed other things overboard to lighten the ship so that it would be less apt to have the waves breaking over it and be capsized and everything. But they lightened the ship by throwing the wheat into the sea. And as day broke, none of them recognized the land. They weren't at a place that they knew where they were, but they saw what looked like a harbor. And they decided to steer toward the harbor, and they were going toward the harbor, and they hit, it says, a reef before they got there. They hit something, they grounded the boat, and the front of the boat was stuck on whatever, and there was no freeing it. I mean, the waves and the wind coming behind, they must have had some kind of sail up to kind of keep the boat, going with the wind a little bit, but there was nothing they could do now. So, and it says the soldiers were going to kill all the prisoners so that none of them would escape. But the centurion, Paul's guard, says, no, we need to just let them be, because the centurion was determined that Paul was going to get to Rome. I mean, that was his task, to get Paul to Rome to see the emperor, to have his trial in front of the emperor. And so the centurion speaks up, to let all of the prisoners live. And then it's the cry or the command goes, for anybody that can swim, go ahead and jump off and swim to shore. So they weren't so awfully far from shore. And swimming with the wind and with the waves is maybe a little bit easier than against them, but still intimidating to say the least. When you get those big waves, I remember swimming lessons, or just even swimming when there's waves and you go to take a breath and a wave of you swallow a gulp of water because it's you're at the mercy of the elements. And so this is where they found themselves, at the mercy of the elements, not knowing where they were. So they had struck a reef. It says the bow struck, remained immovable, and the stern, the back of the boat, was being broken up. So that those who could swim, ably swim, were encouraged to swim to shore, and those that couldn't swim were encouraged then to grab onto some of the pieces of the ship as it was breaking up and use those, the broken boards, to help them stay afloat so that they could also get to shore. And it says that they all followed. Some swam, and some waited on the planks and other pieces of the ship. And it says, and so it was that all were brought safely to land. So what Paul's vision had been, what the message that Paul had received from God, from an angel, through Jesus, through however he had gotten this, came true. Paul's words to them, if we ride the storm out, if we stick together, we will all make it safely to shore. And they did. They all made it safely to shore. And I was thinking that I had read someplace here that it was 256 men on the ship, but I'm not seeing, in all 276 persons on the ship. So the crew, the centurions, the soldiers, the prisoners, 276 people on this ship. That's a pretty sizable vessel. You think, how big a boat would you need to have 276 people on it? That's pretty good size, plus some wheat, plus other whatever they had on there. So this was, for its day, this was a sizable, good-sized ship. Should have been safe, should have been secure, but yet was tossed about and battered and destroyed by the wind and the waves and the sea. And just as, God had kept Paul and everyone there safe, it's that same promise that we have, that we seem to be battered by wind and waves and everything, and right now we're battling drought and, so many different things go on in our lives. There's just, drought, sickness, so many things that batter us, that can take us down, that can try to destroy our spirits, that can, destroy us, to take us away from God, turn us away from God. And we have the example in Paul of listening to God, of hearing God's word, of trusting God's word, and knowing and sharing God's word. Paul wasn't afraid to tell the others that, we're all going to be safe. And then when he perceived that some of the people on the ship were going to try to escape, he spoke up and said to the centurion, his guard, that, if these guys take off, there's no guarantees. All promises from God are off somehow. But when we're battered about by life and by the challenges of life, and we find those challenges on a regular basis, we really do. I mean, every day I need God. I know that I need God. And at the end of the day, it's another time to say thanks for another day. Thanks for the blessings of the day, and thanks for all things that happened, and thanks for safely getting to the end of the day. You know, there's a song where you sing, sometimes I guess we sing it more during Lent because it's an evening song. Now the day is over, you know, night is drawing nigh. I don't know if I could get all the words for it, and the melody line is not real strong in my head because I like to sing the bass line of that song, and it's just a rolling bass line. And it, you know, when I sing that, you know, now the day is over. That's the way the bass line is that the melody is, now the day is over, night is drawing nigh. You know, shadows of the evening, you know, swiftly steal across the sky. But that rolling bass line makes me think of the rolling and tossing sea, and how sometimes it's, you know, you're out on that rolling sea, you're on the, you know, and it can be comforting, but by the same token, it can get pretty hectic sometimes. But at the end of the day, when the day is over, we give thanks to God. And that's what I'm sure Paul and all of those on the ship did when they found themselves safely on land, all unharmed, all accounted for, as was Paul's vision, as what Paul had known from God. And tomorrow we'll read a little bit more, and we're getting real close to finishing up the book of Acts, as I mentioned earlier. So may God bless you richly today. May you survive the storms of life and know that God is always leading and guiding.